if maybe you're running a cleaning business, some type of business that you need to supply a uniform, in just the nature of the industry and the thin margins you operate on. Maybe you are truly federal minimum wage employees, $7.25, and you want to set up a deduction so the employee pays for the uniform, the clothes, the shirt, the pants, the boots, safety boots, whatever it might be. Basically, any of that you do, the deductions cannot take them below that $7.25 minimum wage, correct?
Exactly. So, right, in the context of uniforms, right, any permissible deductions cannot reduce that employee's hourly rate under the minimum wage.
Now, besides a payroll deduction, can you still, as an employer, require the employee to pay for, out of their own pocket, said uniform or safety boots or whatever the case may be?
So typically the answer will be no, because essentially, forcing the employee to pay for something that's required is tantamount to, a deduction itself. There may be situations where that's permissible. For instance, OSHA seems to state that, if, for instance, some safety or protective equipment is provided free of cost by the employer to the employee, and then that's lost or intentionally ruined by the employee, that under certain circumstances the employer could require the employee to pay for a replacement. But yeah, typically, the cost of the uniform, other than, for instance, casual, wear that, could be worn by the employee, outside of work. But, uniforms that are something other than that are typically, considered a business expense of the employer. And, if the employer requires the employee to bear any of that cost, we're talking about something that can't cut below their wages. Now, there are states that, treat this differently. For instance, in New York, there's a somewhat complicated way that the state goes about this. So for instance, we don't want to forget about cleaning. So, when there's the one issue of providing a uniform to employees, and then there's a second question of who's responsible for the laundering of that. And if it's the employee, are they getting paid for that? And different states will treat that differently. In New York, for example, more or less let's say you give an employee a polo shirt that has the company's logo. Well, even though they could wear that polo shirt outside of, business time, the fact that it has a logo on it makes it a uniform. So let's say, they have that uniform, and now, they have 3 or 4 of those shirts, and the employee needs to launder them. In New York, there's actually an allowance that employers are required to pay to employees in any work week in which the employee has to launder their uniform. And I won't get into the specifics for those New York employers out there, but it depends on the number of hours that week that the employee works. And of course, there's an option that employers can offer a free laundering service. But you can see that certainly the idea of a uniform doesn't necessarily end at, the company providing, say, a free of charge uniform. The company should consider, what time and expenses that employee might have with respect to, maintaining that uniform. And state law could dictate that the company needs to pay additional amounts above the minimum wage to cover that.